तो क्या तकलीफ है, प्रॉब्लम क्या है? अरे कहानी कहानी होती है और वही कहानी हर जगह चलती है, हर वक्त। अयोध्या में, यूनान में, लैला मजनू, रोमियो जूलियट, सिकंदर की चढ़ाई, लंका की लड़ाई, और इस वक्त हमारे आसपास और तुम्हारी जिंदगी, अरे वही कहानी एक ही। सोचो मत कि कहाँ और कब और किसकी, बस मजा लो कहानी। बिल्कुल।
A story once told no longer belongs to its teller. It is carried away like a river, flowing into new lands, reshaped by the tides of memory and perspective. This eternal dilemma of whether a story belongs to its writer, its teller, or its audience lies at the heart of Anant Mahadevan's The Storyteller, a cinematic adaptation of Satyajit Ray's short story. In the film, Tarani Bandhopadhyay is an amazing storyteller but refuses to write down his stories, fearing they will lose their spirit or be criticized. When he is hired by businessman Ratan Garodia to help cure his insomnia with bedtime stories, he assumes his words will serve as mere lullabies. But then a betrayal happens, and this is not of swords or deception, but of something deeper. Garodia begins publishing Tarani's stories under his own pen name. It is a quiet yet searing act of theft, raising the fundamental question that can a story ever be truly owned? And if yes, by whom? Is it the one who creates it, the one who spreads it, or the one who listens it and makes his own? Does it belong to whoever has the power to tell it? But before everything else, have you ever thought about why we all love stories? Well, the reason we love and crave stories is because they are the very fabric of how we understand our world and our reality. As children, bedtime stories comfort us, filling the dark with magic, adventure, and the soothing certainty that no matter how lost the hero gets, they will always find their way home. As we grow, stories evolve with us. Books open doors to new realms, movies immerse us in emotions we didn't know we could feel, and television shows give us characters who become companions in our loneliest moments. Stories allow us to live countless lives that are beyond our own, to experience the thrill of battle, the ache of lost love, the triumph of an underdog, and the wonder of the unknown, all leaving without our seats. Yes, they offer an escape, but also a reflection, helping us to make sense of the chaos that lives within us and around us. Whether whispered under a blanket, projected on a screen, or written in ink, stories give meaning to human experiences. We don't just enjoy stories, we feel them. As children, storytelling was second nature to us. A simple event like a power outage during a dinner, a stray dog following us home, or a teacher scolding a classmate would transform into an epic tale by the time we recounted it at school. Our stories were not about lying, they were about a feeling. Even then, we instinctively know that a story was never just about facts. It was about the way it was told, the way it lived in the imagination of those who heard it. Now, from the moment the languages were born, stories have been our way of preserving wisdom, making sense of chaos, and binding generations together. Before ink met leaf and paper, they were passed down through oral traditions. In ancient Greece, Homer's The Iliad and the Odyssey were not singular creations, but evolving epics shaped and reshaped by bards. The Mahabharata, one of the world's longest epics, was dictated by sage Vedvyas to Lord Ganesh. Yet its very existence acknowledges its many tellers. Sage Vaishampayana recites it to King Janamejaya, and in turn, a wandering bard named Ugrasava Swati narrates it to a group of sages. Each voice reshapes the tale, adding new layers, interpretations, and moral nuances. This tradition has continued through literature and cinema. Shakespeare borrowed literary from historical records and earlier plays, giving us Hamlet, Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, yet today they are undeniably his stories. When Francis Ford Coppola adapted Mario Puzo's The Godfather into a film, he reshaped its soul. Years later, Ram Gopal Varma's Sarkar transplanted the story into an Indian political dynasty, proving once again that stories never remain static. They evolve, they travel. Each adaptation was neither theft nor replication. In fact, it was reinvention. But what happens when a story is taken without permission? While stories thrive on reinvention, there exists a darker side, one where stories are taken without respect and any kind of acknowledgement. and then they are repackaged. The storyteller mirrors this dilemma as the character of Garodia, blinded by ambition, claims Tarani's stories on his own. In an ironic twist, Tarani later turns the game on him by feeding him tales originally written by Rabindranath Tagore. When Garodia publishes them under his name, he is accused of plagiarism and publicly humiliated. This echoes real-world instances where cultures and histories have been rewritten by those with power. Many Disney classics like Aladdin and Mulan are retelling of traditional stories, often altered to fit Western sensibilities. In doing so, entire cultural nuances are lost or distorted. British scholars recorded and edited indigenous folklore during colonial rule, often stripping them of their original intent. Stories that once carried spiritual, communal, or historical significance became exoticized for Western audiences. Thus, while adaptations can bring new life into a tale, it raises an ethical question. Does the storyteller have the right to reshape a story if they do not understand its roots? No modern film explores the burden of storytelling more intimately than Imtiaz Ali's Tamasha. Ved, the protagonist, is a man trapped in a rigid, predefined existence, suppressing his natural instinct to tell stories. As a child, he was enamored by the tales of Ramayana, Shakespeare, Arabian Nights. His world was shaped by fables, but as he grew, society demanded to conform, stripping him of his voice. The film beautifully emphasizes that every life is a story in itself, but not everyone is allowed to be their own storyteller. Society often forces individuals to repeat the same script to get an education, get a job, and live predictably. But the film is asking a critical question: do we own our own narratives, or are we merely actors performing a script that has been written for us? Ved's journey is one of reclaiming his own story, much like Tarani Bandyopadhyay's realization in The Storyteller that a storyteller must sometimes fight to keep his stories his own. But perhaps the very concept of ownership is flawed. Jorge Luis Borges famously wrote that every writer creates his own precursors. He argued that every story is merely a variation of those that came before, constantly evolving in meaning and form. If all stories are echoes of past narratives, then isn't claiming ownership of one simply an illusion? Philosopher Roland Barthes also wrote that the birth of the reader must be at the cost of the death of the author. In his view, once a story is told, the author's intent no longer matters. Only the way that the audience receives and reinterprets the story matters the most. This sentiment is echoed in Life of Pi, a film based on Jan Martel's novel, where Pi Patel presents two versions of his survival tale. One fantastical, filled with animals and wonder, and another grimly realistic. Which stories do you prefer? He asks. The answer is not about which is true, but which feels real. A story is not merely the sum of its words, it is what it evokes in the listener. Likewise, in Rashomon, Akira Kurosawa presents a murder through the perspective of four different narrators, each with their own truth. The film forces us to ask, is a story only as real as the person telling it, or does the truth shift depending on who is listening to the story? Now, the great paradox of storytelling is that while we attempt to tell our own stories, they ultimately own us. They shape our understanding of the world, and they change as we change. Tarani's final act in The Storyteller is poetic. He picks up the pen, something he had long avoided, and begins writing. But in the same breath, Garodia also starts writing, each man now understanding that a story is not just about who creates it, but who lives in it from their own vantage point. Their act of creation suggests that stories belong to whoever has the courage to tell them, and yet they remain beyond anyone's grasp. The question of story ownership is both timeless and unanswerable. Stories, by their very nature, resist possession. They are born from experiences, passed through generations, and changed with every voice that carries them forward. Tamasha taught us that storytelling is both a privilege and a rebellion, fighting to be the narrator of our own tale rather than playing a role dictated by others. The Storyteller reminds us that stories can be stolen, manipulated, or misused, but they also have a way of returning home. Perhaps a story belongs to neither the writer nor the teller, but to the act of telling itself. It is not the first telling or the final word that matters, but the journey of the story takes the people it touches and the transformation it undergoes. So, my dear viewers, what is your story? Do let us know in the comments, and please do let us know about your thoughts of storytelling and the ownership of stories. And yes, please don't forget to like and share this video. And as always, long live cinema.